everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Okay, Melissa, disclaimer on this episode, we're going to talk about the last episode. So
I'm really excited about it, actually. I've been looking forward to this.
So if you have not listened to last week's episode with Michael Allosso, you should go do that first and then come back and listen to this one.
Yeah, good call out.
Because this is our recap, I was just left like on cloud nine after that conversation.
I was too. He's kind of amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, it was fun. And, in some circles, it felt like we had like a celebrity on the podcast, a minor celebrity.
Yeah. Well, actually,
kind of a major celebrity in our circle.
Well, he was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
No, was he really?
Yes, he was.
What was he in that movie?
I think he was either a waiter or the maitre d' at the restaurant that Ferris.
No way.
Yes, he was.
I am going tonight to watch.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. I knew he was in Pink Panther.
He was?
Yeah.
Oh,
awesome. Yeah. Well, sounds
gosh.
like we should have consulted Wikipedia
before we had him on. Oh, wow.
What a fun conversation. So, what were some of your takeaways?
I actually wrote a bunch of notes, which is a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And I have them sort of in the order of what we listened, but I would say, the main takeaway that I absolutely loved, and it was a bit of a revelation for me, is that self-awareness is directly linked to self-confidence.
Yeah.
Like we had never talked about it like that, I don't think.
You called that out like specifically during the conversation.
Yeah.
And, Michael said that you're like the first one to ever make that link when he has presented or talked about this stuff.
Yeah. It is such an interesting thought though, isn't it? And he backed it up with a bunch of his thoughts about that I thought were really fascinating. But what a great focus and what a great reason to continually work on feeling better about yourself.
Yeah, he specifically said to be self-aware, you must like yourself.
Yeah.
You must like yourself.
Yeah. And exactly right. Because if you don't like yourself, you don't want to spend any time with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really know anybody that you don't spend much time with.
Right.
On a more, deeper, intimate level.
Yeah. That's, I think that's a really good call out. And then he also talked about, in that same vein, confidence.
Right.
Being, like the balance of confidence and humility.
Yep.
And you were talking about how, like when you're not confident, or you don't like yourself, you play that actor self.
Yes.
You play in that actor self area, which is not authentic. Right.
And we talk about the actor self all the time, or, we typically do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think the other thing is that the way he was talking about being in relation with people was very much going first. And being optimistic and being caring of people, noticing people's high qualities. The whole premise of his work is really around that. And he is not, no one would be able to do that if we did not feel confident in ourselves.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, as we're talking about self-awareness, and we talk about confidence and we talk about humility, I feel like so often we go to this place of talking about the overconfident style. We talk about just as a general human population, I feel like if we're going to talk about the extremes of confidence, we talk about them in the nature of those that are overconfident. However, I think most of the population is less than confident.
Is underconfident.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the term.
Yeah. It's not the opposite to me of confidence isn't really humility.
Mm-mm.
It is underconfidence.
Yeah.
Or lack of confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was
Yeah.
fascinating. What was something you took away from it?
Well, the stories that I started with to introduce him
Yes.
really just kind of held true through the whole thing. Because this guy,
I know.
when you're near him, he's so complimentary all the time.
I know.
It just makes you
I
feel
know.
good about yourself.
Yes.
Like I walked away from that conversation just with a huge smile on my face, because like he just has this way about him that makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I too did the same thing. And actually, even just thinking about it now, I'm just grinning because he's just, well, first of all, his personality is so
Over the top.
over the top. And I just think, Peggy, how does Peggy do it? That's his wife. How does Peggy do it? You know,
Well,
he really makes an effort to make people feel good.
The other thing I noticed when I re-listened to the podcast
Yeah.
is the style in which he speaks. He actually uses people's first names
Mm-hmm.
like way, way more than anyone would normally use that in conversation. And it actually creates like a very magnetic kind of draw.
It's a more intimate way to interact with someone
Mhm.
is to call them by their name.
Yeah, because everyone loves hearing their own name.
Yes. Yes.
So
Exactly.
a couple things as I was thinking through it, like he started out talking about some of his early career stuff,
Mhm.
and that was being a director. And he
Yeah.
talked about
Yeah, I
the
wrote that too.
relationships between directors and actors and
Yes.
how that applies to self-awareness. And that to me was like a little bit of a aha moment, because I hadn't really thought of like the relationship between an actor and a director and the role of the director,
Yes.
because I've
Right.
never in theater, never around
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And what he said was that the director's job is to give feedback to the actor.
Right. And I thought that was also a huge leadership lesson,
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at the hierarchy in theater, the director is a manager of the
right.
actors,
Yep.
right? And his whole frame of reference was so opposite of how I just had a bias.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bias about the hierarchy in an org chart.
Mm.
And for him to say, no, you know what? It's being a director is simply being able to mirror or notice what somebody is doing
Mm-hmm.
and mirror it to them. You know, do you recognize that you're bouncing your foot when you talk all the time?
Right.
You know, that he used a couple of physical examples to illustrate that point. But what a leadership lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's like, being a director is not telling people what to do, directing them. It's playing back what you're seeing and saying, is that what you're intending? Because I don't know if that's right for here.
Yep. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then I wanted to know, how do I get a director to follow me around in my whole entire life, providing me self-awareness feedback? Wouldn't that be fun? Just like a guy
I don't know.
in a black shirt
I don't know.
with a hat and
Oh, I don't know. I don't think
just
I'd
sitting
like
in
that
one of
very
those high
much.
chairs behind you all the time.
Carrying it around, and then every time you sat down, they'd unpack the chair.
The other thing he talked about was deleting the word just from his vocabulary.
Yes, that was amazing
and
too.
saying yes to more things.
Yeah, he's an extremely busy person.
Mm-hmm.
He travels all the time. He speaks to, is it 1,000? It's more than 1,000 people. Is it 5,000 people a week? I can't remember what he said. It was some crazy stat.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he's been doing this role for a long time. So this is not just like a little blip on his screen. This is him. And the way he talked about even accepting to our invitation to be on the Self-Awareness Journey podcast was lovely. You know,
Yes.
he's like, everything is important.
Yeah.
People are important. Invitations are important.
Yep. Yeah, he positioned that really well.
Yeah, again,
our little
very
podcast. Yeah.
very, very, again, very, very complimentary. Yet, you know what, though? I liked that message because now it can't be probably taken to the literal extreme, but that's not what his intention was. He said, if you eliminate the word just from your vocabulary, you begin to recognize that people are important. The smaller things make huge impact.
Yeah.
And you can't filter through everything that you think, say, and do by only wanting to do the good stuff, the big stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really insightful.
Yep. Yeah, there's a little element of ego in there. I kind of heard, like, don't get your ego out of control, or else you'll start saying no to things that are actually important and impactful.
Yeah, I agree.
He talked about, like, his career, and and we use this word, like, hey, you pivoted, which I don't know that he super resonated with, but
I think he did, or he certainly was trying to explain his
what he was talking about, though, was like reinventing himself. Like, he was this high school drama teacher, then he
for 10
was
years.
a director, actor in New York, and then he became this CEO level coach and business speaker. And I thought that was interesting to think about how, like, he did reinvent himself in these different kind of roles.
Yeah.
But what he talked about was that it's been self-awareness the entire time.
Yeah. I was really struck by that part of the conversation too, on a number of levels. Like, I was thinking to myself, how many times, because he didn't talk about those shifts or pivots. He didn't talk about those as to why he did them. They just were different chapters of his life. And I was reflecting when he said that, because my mind started to go back to, as an actor, and I follow people, singers and actors and whatnot on social media platforms. And the authentic ones will talk about how you really have to have confidence because you get no's all the time. Actually, that's all you get, except for the very rare yes. And I started thinking to myself, even if you are at the top of your game, picture this in your life. You're at the top of your game in something and you're still told no all the time because of either competition or timing or, downsizing or whatever the reasons might be. Even if you're in a successful relationship, but suddenly the other person has to leave for some reason that's very real for them. And you think about what makes people shift into something different in their lives. And most of the time, people will push forward this. They don't want to talk about the authentic reasons why, or the changes were not favorable in the moment. And yet they ended up being something so wildly awesome for their next stage, right? And how we, a lot of times during change, we hate change. We talk about that all the time. Nobody likes change. And if they say they like it, they're lying. I mean, the act of change can be very scary. And yet most of the time, especially in your career, the thing that you shift to ends up being much, much better for you than what you were just leaving. And I was just thinking about that from his perspective too, because do you remember how he ended that part of the conversation? He said something like, I can't wait to see what my next thing is. Right?
Yeah, he kind of leaned into that idea that he's got a next chapter.
Well, we all do. That's the thing. We all do. And he at least has the awareness and presence of mind to not just recognize it, but to call it out and then decide how he's going to be with it. And wow, that's like, to me, if he did nothing else except talk about that on the podcast, that would have been a huge learning opportunity for us. And it just Here he just glazed right over it in like 3 sentences.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with some of those simple comments.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they're very intentional.
yeah.
That's the thing with him is he seems like he's having fun all the time, and he's, and he's very present and loves communication and conversation. But he's got very deep motives about what and how he talks.
Yep. So I had asked, earlier, how do you get like feedback so you can improve your self-awareness? And then he talked about this whole example of giving a compliment to the barista at a coffee shop.
Yeah, that's right.
And frankly, it started off making me a little uncomfortable, and I tried to call it out, but it was like,
me too.
no, I can't, like, seriously, as like a middle-aged man, I can't go compliment the barista.
21-year-old barista.
And so he talked about how to do that in a way that can work. But I thought that was interesting. So I might try that. We'll see I'll let you know how it goes. Actually, I was out to breakfast yesterday. And I thought about that. It was like our server just had like a really great energy about her that morning. And I was like, how do I call out that energy that she has and how appreciative I am of her making a great experience for us this morning without it sounding weird? And I just couldn't do it. I was like,
well, that's what he talked about. He said women have an easier time than men. He talked about that. I also would like to frame, he did make, probably 3 times in the conversation, he was very much talking about the female perspectives of things. And I appreciated his effort in that way. And yet I don't know if I'm in 100% in alignment with everything that he said, but I'm not really heavily focused on that as much as he is. And he's coming from a very different perspective than mine. So I actually really appreciated his willingness to just, again, say what's on his mind.
Yeah. He did talk about how when you're in that situation, you really have to think about how am I going to be perceived by others? And I think that's the key part is a lot of times we maybe speak before we think about that question.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I would make a more global statement. We often speak before we think, full stop.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it doesn't work out very well.
But what the point he was trying to make was, if you engage with other people, start helping them with a little bit of their self-awareness, that comes back to you. That's reflected back to you. And he actually said, when you give to the universe gives back.
Yeah. And yes, I loved that. And what you give to the universe comes back exactly the same. Yeah. I really liked that.
So that was interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Then we talked a lot about this idea of, in these interactions, in relationships, in whatever you're doing, asking the question, what is your objective?
Oh my gosh. I wrote that down in all caps while we were talking. I was like, oh, I don't want to forget this because this is so good.
So it's an interesting question. I don't, again, walk into a random conversation or interaction with somebody thinking what is my objective here? It actually, even asking that question seems a little weird. I'm trying to be manipulative. But what he's wanting us to think about is a much more authentic version of that question.
I never thought of that. I never thought that it could be perceived as manipulative, or you felt that it would be by asking yourself that question, that reflective question.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's again, from I don't know, a tactical perspective, it's just I don't walk up, when you and I talk, I'm like, ooh, what is my objective for Melissa today?
Well, why don't you maybe just don't use the sinister voice?
Oh, yeah. The problem is the voice I use in my head. Uh-oh. There's some insight.
No, I loved it. And, the framing of that was to help you come back to what's important in the moment. That's why he was talking about that perspective, and that we too often get lost on what our primary objective is, and we get spooled up and spun off in a completely different way and lose what we were really hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. I see this quite a bit where someone will start a conversation about a thing, and then it takes all these tributaries, and then like the objective's gone. Like what they wanted to communicate or articulate is gone.
Yeah.
He did also say something else super interesting in that part is he talked about objective, but then he talked about what is your obstacle getting to that objective. And he wasn't talking about, and he was talking about like internal obstacles. Like we talked about being an introvert. Like, is introversion my obstacle to communicating effectively with my team?
Yeah. So just to frame this a little bit for the listeners, when we're talking about, objective, it's like the thing that can help you stay focused on the conversation from an authentic perspective. So he was very much talking about being authentic, showing who you really are for the reasons and benefit for the people that you are with in that moment. Like that's what he was really referring to as he was talking about this concept. And if you focus on your objective, it helps you to achieve not just your own personal goal. I mean, he was talking about that, but he wasn't. I mean, he was also talking about it from the perspective of having you achieve your relationship, having you achieve your in the moment success for everybody. And by being more pure, by being more authentic in your objective, it would allow you to do that. And he said, but what gets in the way, and what you were just referring to, is our own obstacles. And that, yeah, exactly. So that was sort of, I just wanted to frame that a little more, because I think that was really an insightful perspective and he used introversion as your obstacle in that moment in the example we were talking about. But man, we have so many obstacles, don't we? Like you talk about the personal obstacles that would prevent us from being clear in our objective. I mean, being afraid, your ego taking a hit, being made fun of for being authentic in moments. A lot of people
fear of being vulnerable.
Yes. I mean, that is a scary, scary thing. I mean, you go into an office place where there's high stakes on something and everyone's working on something, but you feel like there's something really wrong with what's being worked on. That's a real scary thing to say, I want to say something here.
Anxiety, past trauma, like the list goes on and on.
So if your objective is to say to your team, I'm worried about this project, but your obstacle is being afraid of how you will be responded to, or being made fun of, or made to look stupid because, quote, you just don't understand. I mean, those are all things that you'll focus on, which will, as he was saying, then make you not act at all like what you were hoping for. So you've lost your objective. Or your goals.
That takes a while to think about. It takes a while to put that into your brain, and it's going to take even longer to put that into practice and recognizing that in real time.
Well, and the way that I wrote it as his recap was, most people, when they're trying to stay in their objective, they'll get lost. And he said, because we're so focused on every interaction being a certain way, that we end up with loss of objective, and we end up in our authentic obstacle, which is amazing in that way to say it that way, because like he's saying, that was a very well constructed sentence, wasn't it? But he was saying, like, for you, how your introversion in that moment, you could tell yourself your obstacle story, which is, I'm an introvert. I don't want to do this. I can't do this. I'm not doing this. And how often that obstacle presents itself throughout our lives. We all have those really key, and he called them authentic obstacles. I really liked that.
All right. What else did he talk about? He talked about this balance of confidence and humility, which we already talked about a little bit. And how, like, if you're too far on one side or the other, it causes problems. The one thing that he really struck me when he talked about that, we were talking about, again, taking compliments. And I historically do not take compliments well.
You did so well, though, when he said that to you. Do you recognize what you did?
Thank you.
Yes, I was going to tell you that. I forgot.
But he said, dismissing compliments dishonors the other person.
Oh,
which I was like,
that
oh,
was huge.
of course it does. That's so
Yeah,
obvious. And
I
I've been
know.
like such a jerk about that for the past 45 years.
No, don't judge yourself.
I'm so
No.
judgy over here. But
Yeah.
no, that's a very good perspective and a really good reminder for me that
Mm,
it's even if compliments and kudos and things don't drive me, like they're not
mhm.
the thing that really gets me motivated, or it's
Right.
not the thing that helps me as much. But being mindful of how me dismissing that affects the other person is super important.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree with you more. It really puts it into perspective that as much as we are all about us, because we all are,
Hmm.
it isn't about us. If somebody gives us a compliment, it isn't about us. Really, it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's honoring that
Yep.
person noticing.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. I love Michael Allosso. He's such a good guy.
um,
We learned a lot.
we
Holy
did
cats.
learn a
I mean,
lot.
that pod was a little longer than our normal, but my gosh, I feel like we just scratched the surface. I feel like we could have talked forever.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What else? What else did you kind of think, like, or maybe what was your like general takeaway from
Yeah.
that?
I had a couple actually. One of the things that I had as a general takeaway is that you and I do this work to help create self-awareness. That's our goal here. And we do so through just lots of silly little kitschy, crazy conversations. Yet the value of self-awareness is unmatched. And especially if you take Michael's perspective that self-awareness comes from self-esteem. And we were all put on this planet for a reason. We all deserve to be here simply because we're human beings, not because of what we do, just because of who we are. And I just felt that his mission is to make sure people understand that. And I really valued that as a major takeaway.
Yeah.
How about you?
My major takeaway was just around how like these observations, compliments, and gratitude have such a huge effect on people.
Yeah.
So being on,
it's beautiful.
like, I guess the receiving end of that conversation with
I
Michael,
know.
it was such a good reminder, like, yes, I can do these small things in my day-to-day and make other people feel like this too, which this would be great. And it's not hard.
I was just going to say that we don't have to be experts to do any of this. That's the thing. You don't have to learn. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to read a book about how to be, all this and a bag of chips. You just have to be kind.
Yep.
And you have to notice people. You have to spend a little time noticing others and not focusing on yourself.
That's funny. In my notebook, I've got like some notes from what we wanted to talk about today, and I got like my notes from Michael like on the previous page. Literally, one of my notes just says, "Be nice."
We should get shirts made.
Be nice. Do what your mom told you to do when you were like 3 years old. Just be nice.
Oh.
Well, fun. What a fun
Great
episode.
recap.
Hopefully, and the thing I would be looking forward to, I really hope that we could do this. He said that we could go to the Guthrie and watch a play with him. Wouldn't that? Do you remember that?
Oh my gosh, I forgot that.
And
I forgot that.
So what we'll do is we'll secretly record that whole thing and then release it as an episode.
All the commentary. Oh, I love it. All right. Well, great recap. I can't wait to hear how people respond.
Yep.
I would really love for people to respond on social media. Give a couple comments when you listen to this, either in LinkedIn or Facebook, if you're on either of those two. We'd really like to hear how you felt and what you responded to the most in this discussion, because there were Often in our pods, we will talk about one specific theme. And in this one, there were so many we couldn't possibly keep up. It'll be interesting to hear what people think.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.